Hi, my name is Karizana James and I'm doing this assignment for the course Physiological Psychology. My professor who's teaching me is Professor Darby. The course or the assignment is about to explain the different parts and functions of the human brain. The human brain is one of the largest and most complex organ of the body. It controls your breathing, emotions, thoughts, speech, actions, and stores information from the outside world. The assignment is about the different parts of the human brain and its functions. The brain is a 3-pound organ and that contains more than 100 billion neurons and many specialized cells. The first part I'm going to talk about is the skull. The skull, as you can see, is a fusion of bones and it's the outer layer of the brain. When you see a human brain for the first, we see the skull. The skull contains brain stems and outlines the face. It has 8 different bones that protects us from many injury.
2, 3.
The next part we're going to talk about is the cerebrum or the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is a part of the brain that functions to make human beings unique. It distinctly has human traits including higher thought, language, human consciousness, as well as the ability to think, reason, imagine, all originate in the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is what we see when we look at the brain. It is the outer portion and that can be divided into 4 lobes, each bump on the surface of the brain and is also known as gyri, while each groove is known as sulci. So let's talk about the next part, that is the sulci. The sulci increases the surface area. This is the sulci, as you can see. This part is the sulci. The arrow is pointed towards the sulci. It increases the surface area of the cerebral cortex. Increasing the surface area of the brain allows more neurons to be packed into the cortex so that it can process more information. The next part I'm going to talk about is the gyri. Gyri is this. As you can see, my finger is pointed onto the gyri. Here, it is a wavy structure. You can see. So the gyri forms brain divisions by creating boundaries between the lobes of the brain and dividing the brain into 2 hemispheres. The cerebrum, as you can see, I'm pointing over here. This is the cerebrum of the brain. The cerebrum is the largest part of the human brain. It has a rough surface, the cerebral cortex, which I just told right now, a few seconds before, the cerebral cortex, with the gyri and sulci, as I explained in the other picture. It can also be divided. I'm sorry for what happened before. So the next part I'm going to talk about is the cerebrum. As you can see, it is pointed over here, the cerebrum, and the cerebrum is the largest part of the human brain. It contains the cerebral cortex and it has a rough surface, is known as the cerebral cortex, as I told before, which has a gyri and sulci. It can also be divided into 2 hemispheres, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. Although these hemispheres look identical or the same, the left and right hemisphere has very specific functions. So the next part I'm going to talk about is the cerebral hemispheres. As you can see, the right hemisphere is this pink shaded portion over here, is the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere is also known as the creative side of the brain. It is responsible for translating visual information. The next part is the left hemisphere. The blue shaded portion in this picture is the left hemisphere. It is called as the logical side of the brain. It controls language and speech. So, just as I mentioned, we are going to talk about the 4 lobes of the human brain. According to the function, the cerebrum is further divided into 4 different lobes. They are the parietal lobe, the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. So, the first part I'm going to talk about is the frontal lobe. As you can see, this red portion in this picture is the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe rests just below the forehead and controls our reasoning, organizing, and our ability to speak, solve problems, pay attention, and our emotions are controlled all by the occipital lobe. So that is, it is with our thinking, speaking, reasoning, problem solving. The next lobe I'm going to talk about is the parietal lobe. That is this yellow picture. yellow shaded picture you can see. So this picture or this lobe particularly talks about it lies below the upper rear of our brain. This lobe manages our complex behaviors. It includes 5 senses: touch, vision, taste, spatial awareness, etc. The parental lobe also relays sensory information from different parts of the brain, of the body, and helps us to process and learn a language, maintains our body positioning and movement. It includes in reading, body orientation, sensing our information, and understanding language. So that is why I have given this picture of a book. Now next I'm going to talk about is this occipital lobe. Occipital lobe, as you can see, is this green portion over here. It has a picture of our eyes. So the occipital lobe is located in our rear of our brain. The lobe is responsible mainly for our vision, our visual awareness, including our vision attention, optical recognition, and spatial awareness. Occipital lobe is also has the ability to control and interpret a body language, facial expressions, gestures, and body postures. The next lobe I'm going to talk about is this orange color lobe, and it's known as the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe sites close to our ears and is associated with interpreting and translating our auditory stimuli. For example, your temporal lobe allows you to focus to a loud sound when it comes to a party. That is why you like hearing to loud music when it comes to a party. This lobe also helps us in understanding our oral language, general processing knowledge, and stores your verbal and visual memory. So the occipital lobe also has here, as I have mentioned, memories, hearing, behavior, generation, emotion. So see here, 2 people are there. So it usually in hearing and emotions and memories. So that is the temporal. So I spoke about the 4 kinds of lobes: the parental, occipital, frontal, and temporal. Now we are going to talk about the next function, next part of the brain, the cerebellum. The cerebellum, as you can see, is a circle, spiral thing that goes over here. This is the cerebellum. I don't know which shade is this exactly. This is the cerebellum. Cerebellum is also known as our little brain. It is located at the back of the brain. It is just below the occipital lobe. As you can see, it is here below the occipital lobe and on the top of the pons. On the top of the pons. Just like the cerebellum has 2 equal hemispheres and a wrinkly surface. Although the cerebellum is small, it contains a lot of neurons. It can help coordinate the movement of our body muscles, especially the fine movement of our hands and our feet. The function of the cerebellum also includes maintaining posture, the body equilibrium, body balance, and even the ability to speak, our speech. The next part I'm going to talk about is this small stem-like part known as the brain stem. The brain stem is the posterior part of the human brain and that connects the brain with the spinal cord. So here, the rest of the picture, if you draw, you can see that it will be directly connecting to the spinal cord throughout the spinal cord that goes throughout our back. So the brain stem works together to regulate the essential functions including temperature, breathing, heartbeat, and our blood pressure. In addition, the brainstem coordinates the fine movement of our face and limbs. The functions of the area include sneezing, vomiting, swallowing, and the eye movements and our mouth. The brainstem comprises of the parts of the brain such as the midbrain, pons, and medulla, all of which has specific functions. As you can see, as I mentioned, regulates heart rate, breathing, and temperature. So the next part I'm going to talk about is pons. You can see this portion here. This is the pons part of the brain. This is the spinal cord which goes down, as you can see, and this is the pons. Pons is the largest structure of the brain stem and is found behind the medulla. So it comes found above the medulla. I'm very sorry. Pons is found above the medulla. See, here is the medulla and pons is found above the medulla. Behind, that is below the midbrain. So underneath the midbrain and in front of the cerebrum and cerebellum. The pons also helps us to regulate sleep, breathing patterns, respiration and reflexes. The pons contains many vital nerves. We are going to discuss about that, the three different types of nerves in the pons. So we're going to discuss about the three different types of nerves in the pons. That is very important, and their function. So this blue color is the trigeminal nerve. As you can see, this is the trigeminal nerve. Here also the same trigeminal nerve. The trigeminal nerve controls the facial muscles that are involved in chewing, biting and swallowing. The next nerve I'm going to talk about is the abducens nerve. Abducens nerve is this pink color which you can see over here. This is the abducens nerve in this picture. This nerve allows our eyes to look from side to side. The next one I'm going to talk about is this nerve which you can see next to the green one, vestibulocochlear nerve. This nerve allows hearing and balance. I'm going to talk about the medulla. As you can see, this one, this small portion over here is, no, where is the medulla? Yeah, portion over here is the medulla oblongata. I'm sorry, this portion over here is the medulla oblongata. The medulla is a cone shaped, as you can see, is structure located in front of the cerebellum. The prominent role of the medulla oblongata is regulating involuntary automatic functions such as breathing, digestion, sneezing, swallowing and heart rate. Next I'm going to talk about is the limbic system. This is the limbic system of the brain. The limbic system is a complex brain structure that lies down, deep down below the cerebrum. It contains thalamus, hypothalamus, hippocampus and amygdala. Since it plays a significant role in controlling our emotions and forming our memories, it is often known as the emotion brain or a childish brain. Now I am going to talk about the next part, that is the thalamus. Thalamus is this green portion. Thalamus. So the thalamus is a small grey matter that relays sensory information from our spinal cord, brain stem and other parts of the brain to the cerebral cortex. The thalamus is a relay station that signals from where signals are received by the human body from the outside to the entire brain. In addition, it is also related to consciousness, memory and sleep. Next part I'm going to talk about is the hypothalamus. That is this portion, the blue one is the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is the part of the brain that sits right below the thalamus. Although the hypothalamus is a very tiny part of the brain, it has one of the most crucial and busiest roles. The primary function of hypothalamus is maintaining the homeostasis of the body, and it is functions like eating, endocrine system, everything is linked to the hypothalamus. The next part I'm going to talk about is the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum are axon fibers connecting the two cerebral hemispheres. This is the corpus callosum. Now I'm going to talk about the various anterior parts of the hypothalamus. What we are going to talk is about the anterior component, which you can see is this green part, anterior hypothalamic nucleus. So this part is a very prominent part. It controls the cardiac rhythms, thermoregulations, sweating and the development the next part I'm going to talk about is the middle part. That is a tuberal part that you can see is this blue part. It controls functions such as prominent regions and functions responsible for shaping and controlling eating habits. Other functions are regulation of blood pressure, heart rate, then gastrointestinal stimulations, etc. The last part I'm going to talk about in the hypothalamic region is the posterior region, which is this red color part. The posterior region nuclei control the functions like memory, blood pressure, shivering, energy balance, feeding, sleep arousal and breathing. Next I'm going to talk about is the pituitary gland. It's a master gland. It controls our body regulations, growth, sex development, metabolism, etc. The next one is the amygdala. Amygdala is this blue color, which is linked with our emotions. And we're going to talk about the hippocampus. Hippocampus is this surface which is linked with our memory. The main function of it is the memory. And the last part I'm going to talk about is the basal ganglia. Basal ganglia is that part of the brain that controls our movement.